Hello, welcome once again to Theology 345, Church in the World. We're into our second text, Jacques Ellul. We talked about salt, light, and sheep in the midst of wolves last time, and we also talked about being the Christian being having a temporary and apologetic ethic. I just want to cover a few of those things and make sure that you've gotten all of that because we're going to be moving quickly on. We talked about a bit about the Christian being a sign, a particular sign for the world. And I want you to keep in mind now that he's putting all of these terms in the context of understanding and functioning in a technological society in the prospect of renewing the church. Today, I'm going to just read to you his statement in terms of the will of the world, the will of the world. On page 19, he says, the will of the world is always a will to death, a will to suicide. We must not accept this suicide, and we must act that it cannot take place. So we must know what is the actual form of the world's will to suicide in order that we might oppose it, in order that we might know how and in what direction we ought to direct our efforts. The world is neither capable of preserving itself, nor is it capable of finding remedies for its spiritual situation. Okay, so Ellul is taking us to a different level here in terms of how we need to talk about renewing the church. We're talking about the global church now, and he's talking about spiritually, he's talking about renewing. So today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at his second chapter in the work. He talks about revolutionary Christianity. Now this is a kind of provocative term, and I want to touch base on some of the things he says about revolutionary Christianity. That's the chapter we'll be dealing with. The first thing he says that is kind of amazing is he says on page 23 that the world is not, the Christian are not acting the world as a historic factor, but as it's apocalyptic. And let me kind of just read that to you. He said that is what matters. Further, as Christians, it is essential to understand that every moment of man's life is not historic, but apocalyptic. So if we take the fall seriously, the expulsion from Eden, which implies the constant presence of death, and if we take seriously the promise of the return of Christ, of which we know neither the day nor the hour, we are obliged to consider the present moment apocalyptic. That is to say, as the last before man is confronted by judgment and mercy. Now that's a mouthful to talk about theologically, but he's saying is that you can't live in this moment as if you've got all of this time before you to figure stuff out. That every moment we are dealing with the issue of the fall. Every moment we are dealing with the brokenness of man, and we anticipate the judgment of God every moment that we live. The Christian ought to live inside that moment. On page 27 of that same chapter, he talks about the worship of facts, and technique. And then he talks about how that technology and techniques have taken over how we understand. Let me just read a little of that. Thus, from the moment that techniques, the state in production, are facts, we must worship them as facts, and we must try to adapt ourselves to them. What he's saying is we no longer question, we just try to adapt. So let me give you an example of that, because I know you're probably saying, well, what does he mean when he says that? Let's take social media, for example, and how social media has confronted and moved into, say, employment. Now we have Snapchat, we have Facebook, we have Twitter. All of these things have become means by which employers and individuals image who and what we are and what we're doing. So now today, it's not even thought of that you would apply to a position in society without attaching some information in terms of social media. In fact, in the marketplace, people will not even consider you if you do not have email, if you're not on Facebook, if you're not providing a LinkedIn kind of connection. And so more and more technology is dictating, so to speak, how we behave and how we are valued in society. And we are adapting ourselves to that. We are not resisting that at all. In fact, you're kind of laughed at if you have the old Galaxy phone. You're kind of laughed at if you don't fit in terms of the cell phone technology or the smartphone technology. More and more technology is dictating the value, watch that now, the value of the human person, of the human being. Okay, so that he's addressing that. He's saying that we're not questioning that any longer. This is moving toward his assumption that technology is being deified, is becoming the opportunity to say you have value or you don't. Moving on, he says that there must be a revolution against this type of thinking and behavior. If you look on page 31, he says, now the situation of the Christian in the world is a revolutionary situation. His or her share in the preservation of the world is to be an inexhaustible revolutionary force in the midst of the world. Here we are concerned with the preservation of the world, for in our day, as I have tried to show already, conformity to history leads to catastrophe, to the death of millions of people, to the disappearance of the possibilities of human civilization. Early in that text, he talks about, at the present moment, we are confronted by a choice, either a mass civilization, technological conformists, the brave new world of Huxley, hell organized on earth for the bodily comfort for everybody, or a different civilization which we cannot yet describe because we do not know what it will be. It still has to be created consciously by Christian men and women. So he's in a very provocative way beginning to challenge this notion of technology. There's no doubt that technology more and more is becoming a part of who we are. In fact, I just recently viewed a documentary on how people were having separation anxiety when they were not connected, to their laptops or to their phones, their smartphones, or to their cable televisions. All the technology that is feeding information to us is becoming more and more a part of our lives, so much so that we almost cannot function without some aspect of technology connected to us. We are becoming basically electrical systems now. We're starting to become cyborgs, if you will, electronic cyborgs, where basically our phone is us. So this is a provocative kind of perspective that L. Euler's taking a look at. Again, moving on in terms of terms. Now, I've already given you the notion that we are in an apocalyptic situation as opposed to a historical situation. I've already given you the assumption that we worship the facts and that there needs to be a revolution against that kind of thinking. But let's move on a bit toward what he talks about and in the remedy in terms of his dialectic. The first condition that he begins to describe for us in this situation is that the Christian belongs to two cities. On page 33, he talks about the Christian belonging to city. Now we know about Augustine's notion of city of God, city of man. That's not necessarily where he's going with this. He says the first condition is well-known truth, but in reality it's not sufficiently understood. The Christian belongs to two cities. He is in the world and he has a socialite. He is the citizen of a nation. He has a place in a family. He has a situation that he must work and earn money. All that he does in this world he ought to do seriously because he's bound up with the life of other people and must not neglect what are called duties. But he says on the other hand, he cannot wholly belong to this world. For him, this world can only be a tabernacle. Your body's just a tabernacle and he quotes 2 Peter 1:13, in which he is a stranger and a pilgrim. Hebrews 11:13. For him, it is a temporary situation. So he's saying being in this world in a temporary situation suggests to us that we have a responsibility to another master, he suggests. And when he talks about that, he's talking about Jesus Christ. And he goes to this point that Jesus makes when he talks about, Paul makes when he talks about ambassadors for Christ. We are called to an ambassadorship. Our master is another master than in this world, and so we should not have allegiance to this world as much as we should have allegiance to Jesus Christ, he suggests. And he says that we are called to be ambassadors for reconciliation. Our job on this earth as the sign of who Christ is to be ministers of reconciliation. And he uses another piece of scripture there on page 34. He says in 2 Corinthians 5:20, he talks about the notion of ambassadors for Christ. And we need to take that seriously. What does it mean? And sometimes he suggests that we reject our ambassadorship. So Christians are buying into the world, buying into this hell on earth, this technological society, and not sufficiently challenging the church and the world to reconcile itself to Jesus Christ. That we are buying into the facts. And later on, we'll study a term that he'll use. I'll just give it to you now, but we'll look at it in more depth later. He talks about intellectual suicide, the buy-in. We buy into the notions about what's going on. So the Christian lives in two worlds, remember that. A world that he has responsibilities and duties in, but also a world in which he is called spiritually to be the ambassador for Christ. All right. On page 46, he talks about basically a style of life. He says because we live in this world and the way we live in this world, and we are bombarded with facts all the time. And he also says, for example, I want you to read and pay close attention. He says that we make a difference now between facts and truth. In other words, facts are the paramount thing now. Everybody is attempting to be efficient and productive, and nobody's necessarily looking at the truth. The truth is that there's enough, for example, food in the world to feed everybody. The facts don't say that, but the truth is that with adequate distribution and with the reduction of competition in terms of market forces, we could feed everyone in the world. But we choose not to look at that truth. We choose instead to look at the facts, and so we allow, for example, close to 40,000 people a day to die because they can't get vitamins, fresh water, and basic food supply in the world. We can look at the world around here today, and we can see things going on. If we look at the Muslim refugee situation, for example, the facts of it is that people are jumping on boats and trying to sail into nations that basically don't want them to go. And so because of that, they're drowning. The truth of it is that that's a humanitarian disaster that we as a world should be responding to. And so we choose to turn our eyes away from the reality of the truth of that situation and simply reduce it down to the facts. That's kind of where he's going with that. And we'll talk more about that when we get to means and ends. Let's talk about a little the Christian style of life. On page 46, he talks about a style of life that we need to live. And part of that style of life has to do with how we function and present ourselves in the world. And he says on page 46, and then comes the question of a style of life. Christians ought to try to create a style of life which does not differentiate them from others, but yet permits them to escape from the stifling presence and pressure of our present form of civilization. For it is not by the method of direct attack, by the effort to make spectacular changes, by reconstructing the world as a whole, that we can achieve anything. The only successful way to attack these features of our modern civilization is to give them the slip, to learn how to live on the edge of the civilization in a way in which people drawn attention not to all this stuff, all this technology, but to the human quality, the Christ-like quality that's found in each of us. So let me give you a story in relationship to that. Every year, when I was in undergraduate school, we had something called a pigger. And the pigger was when all the local farmers got together and they slaughtered some hogs and they barbecued them. And my small college, which is a Presbyterian college, would participate in this regional activity in like southern Illinois. And this process of doing this, you know, all the local distributors, the beer distributors and the local food people would come together and they would give this great picnic. And it was a nice situation, but it often became kind of out of hand because people were drinking too much and eating too much pork and potato salad in hot weather, and they were getting sick, and you know, it just became a tremendous kind of haberdash of chaos, if you will. In the midst of that, we had a group of people who we called during our undergraduate, we called them Jesus freaks. They would walk around with guitars and holy jeans on, and they had bandanas on their head, and they drive a van that was painted with flowers and things, and they played all this Christian gospel music all the time. And we kind of disparaged them, and we talked about them and said, well, these people are crazy. During this time, we had to get to this pigger, we had to cross a highway. And crossing the highway, people would have accidents because they would try to drive from the campus to the highway. The same people that was disparaged and talked about, who were what we call the Jesus freaks, basically assumed responsibility and said that they would assume responsibility, making sure that everybody got safely back and forth from this huge celebration that had kind of turned chaotic and hedonistic, if you will, in terms of the drinking and the eating and the partying and stuff. You know, everybody was partying, had a party going on, and people were trying to, you know, just dance all over the place. And these Jesus freaks, these people who were disparaged, were the ones who basically saved lives by saying, well, we will drive the van and take you all back and forth so that you all wouldn't get hurt participating in this celebration. Their style of life, and this is my point, their style of life was something that was rejected by society. But at an important time where lives were at stake, their style of life stood up and showed a tremendous apologetic, if you will, in terms of a good deed, in helping us not be harmed by things that we were doing to ourselves. Within a year or two of them making that stand as Christians in this situation, the pigger basically no longer had a focus or thrust for the college campus. It became more and more something that people did in a more human and a more moderate fashion. And essentially what the Christians did was embrace the campus and raise our consciousness into our own humanity, to a point where we stopped doing negative things to ourselves. A great example of how a lifestyle, a Christian lifestyle, produces a revolutionary Christian situation. I wanted to tell you that story because that story is key to the development of the attitude of the Christian lifestyle in the world today. We have to be uniquely different so that we can be prepared to help and change and give light to and salt to in the midst of the sheep of wolves, to changing a situation for the better. I'm going to end there today, but I want you to be prepared to deal with the gradually technical means become more important than the truth. On page 52, we're going to take a brief look at what we would call gradually, and what he says basically is gradually technical means become more important than the search for truth. Science had to become more and more effective for technical purposes, and now science is the only significant in terms of technology. Its whole direction is toward applied science. We're going to be talking about next time the justification of technique and the means and the end. See you then.